Hello my dear children. Today I am just going to give you a very fresh and the new lesson, particularly on the importance of tense. What do you mean by tense? Remember, at first I must introduce myself particularly to the tense topics. Before you jump over to the discussions of the tense, first you have to understand that what is this tense? What do you mean tense? Remember, tense comes from the verb. Tense comes from the verb. Because from the verb, we just get a tense. So what is verb? If you just want to know about your tense, you must at first know something about your verb. Because from the verb, your tense comes. So what is the verb? So verb refers to either state or being. State or being. Any word that denotes state or being is called the verb. Number 2, verb refers to possession. Verbs also refers to possession. And number 3, most of the verbs refers to action. In English, 90% of the verbs come from the action, or 90% of the verbs are related to the action. That is why most of the grammarians, they say that verb is nothing but it is an action word. But remember that not only verb refers to action, in certain cases your verb also refers to state. In certain cases your verb refers to possession, but in most cases your verbs deal with actions. Remember, what is the state? What do you mean by the state of the verb? If I say I am hungry, I am hungry. Remember, this am is the verb refer to state or action. Because hunger is the state, or hunger is the action related to the subject I. Verb is always related to the subject, subject is always related to the verb. So am is a verb, refers to state or being. Then a possession. If I say he has a mobile, he has a mobile. Remember, which word refers to the possession? This particular word is has. So has is also a verb referring to possession, because he is in the possession of the mobile. So has is the possession related to the subject he. Okay. Number 3 is the action. Number 3 is the action. Action means, suppose if I say cows graze in the field. If I say cows graze in the field, here graze is a verb referring to action. Because graze is the act of grazing by cows, or act of grazing of cows. So graze refers to the action. So always remember, before we discuss about your tense, about the use of tense, about the forms of tense, about the various of linguistic aspects of the tense, it is compulsory for you to know about the verb. As verb denotes to tense, as verb refers to tense, or verb creates tense, verb produces tense. So what is this verb? I have already told you, verb refers to state or being. All these types of be verb. Verb also refers to possession, that means have a verb, has a verb, and in most cases your verb deals with action. That is the verb, the subject acting something. That is called the verb denoting action. Here graze is the verb that refers to action done by the subject cows. So what is this verb? So verb refers to state, verb refers to possession, verb refers to action. Apart from these 3, we don't have any sorts of 4 things simply denoting verb. Verb always refers to state, possession or action. But always remember, apart from states or possession, most of the verses deal with action. That is why most of the grammarians say that verb is an action word. Then remember that from the verb we have a particular important verb that is called tense. Remember that we have a various forms of verbs. That means from the verb you have a various forms. From the verb you have the mood. From the verb you have the voice, that means active voice and passive voice, which I have already given you the explanation. Number 3, from the verb we have the also aspect. Aspect shows whether the action is in progress or whether the action is complete. And the most important form of the verb is called your tense. So these are the 4 leading forms of the verbs. From the verb we have the mood, from the verb we have the voice, from the verb we have the aspect, and from the verb we have the tense. So today we will discuss particularly about your tense. So from the verb we have 4 forms, and from these 4 forms your tense is very important. That is why it is said verb generates tense. That means from the verb we have the tense. So what is this tense? Remember, tense is a Latin word. Tense coming from the Latin word or Latin term tempus. Tense comes from the Latin word tempus. What's the spelling of tempus? T-E-M-P-U-S. Tempus means time. The word tense comes from the Latin word tempus, and tempus means time. So what is tense? What is the brief definition of the tense? That a tense is the form of the verb. Tense is the form of the verb. Since your tense comes from the verb, since your tense is related to the verb, so always remember, tense is the form of the verb that is related to the timing of an action. That is related to the timing of an action or state or possession. I have already told, your verb always refers to action, state or possession. You may obviously skip over state or possession, but you can't simply escape from action, because most of the verbs, they are directly or indirectly related to action. So your verb, from the verb we have the tense. Tense is a Latin word that comes from the Latin term or the Latin word tempus. Tempus means time. So what is the wholesome definition of the tense? The tense is the form of the verb. I have already told. From the verb we have the tense. So tense is the form of the verb that is related to the timing. Since tense comes from the Latin word tempus, and that means time. So tense is the form of the verb that is related to the timing of an action. What is the timing of an action? You have to say, particularly from the tense, whether the action is over or whether the action is in progress, whether the action is already complete or whether the action is going to be completed or is in the progress situation. That is what we have the tense of the verb. Remember, so tense is the form of the verb that is related to the timing of an action or state or possession, but mostly you remember about the action, because it is the timing of the action that is related to the verb which makes tense. So tense always remember. So this tense, so in short, suppose in short you want to know about your tense. How can you know? Remember that since tense comes from the verb and since tense related to time, so in short please remember, your verb plus time is equal to tense. Verb plus time, because a tense comes from the verb. Tense always related to time. So when a verb is related to time, you get your tense. Now I am just going to give you certain examples. For examples, you just try to know about your tense. If I say the Ganga, because remember, Ganga is the name of a holy river. The Ganga rises in the Himalayas. The Ganga rises in the Himalayas. Never say the Ganga rises from the Himalayas, otherwise it will be an error in the use of a preposition. In means showing origin. In means showing birthplace. So here rises is your tense. Now we have to prove how rises is a tense, because rises comes from the verb to rise. Remember, every verb begins with to, and that is the base verb. Here, if rises is the tense, remember, when rises becomes the tense, definitely this tense comes from the verb to rise. Then rising in the Himalayas refers to your general trend, right? Universal truth. So to rise is the verb, then present time. To rise is the verb, then if with the to rise you please mix present time. So to rise is the verb plus present time is equal to rises is the tense. So every tense comes from the verb related to time. Here rises is the tense that comes from the verb to rise plus present time. That is rises is the present tense. Remember, always remember, you think of a tense, you first go to your verb. So when a verb is associated with the time, your time could be your present time or past time or future time. So when a verb is related to present time or past time or future time, they make certain tense. Similarly, here arises is the tense. Another very important thing, please remember, when a verb is used after the subject, here the Ganga is the subject. So when a verb comes after the subject, it always comes in the form of tense. When a verb is used after the subject, it always comes in the form of tense. So this tense comes from the verb plus present time or past time or future time. As usual, we have the present time here. Why is it present time? Because it was so in the past. It rose in the Himalayas in the past. It still rises in the Himalayas now, and it will rise or it will continue to do so in the future. So when the time was there, the time is there, and the time will be there, we generally call it the present time. So verb is the to rise and present time. These two things are combined to make it tense, and the tense is rises. And always remember, your tense usually comes after the subject, because the subject is related to verb plus tense and tense is related to your subject. That is why we just proved it is that every tense comes from the verb and is related to time. So verb plus time is equal to tense. Remember, suppose another example. How can you know your tense? Suppose I will say, mother has fed the dog. Mother has fed the dog. Now you just try to find out the tense first. Obviously, mother is the subject. I have already told you, after the subject, usually we use your tense. So has fed is the tense. Remember, your subject always takes your tense after it. So now we have to know how this particular tense is produced or created. Has fed is the tense. This tense comes from the verb to feed. So to feed is the verb plus time. I have already told you, your verb plus time is equal to tense. If has fed is the tense, if this tense comes from the verb to feed, then what is the time? Time means feeding the dog is already over. So it is the past time. Because mother no longer feeds the dog. Her feeding the dog is already over. Over means it is past time. So to feed is the verb plus past time is equal to has fed is the tense. As usual, you just know every tense comes from the verb and related to time. So has fed is the tense that comes from the verb to feed plus past time. So verb plus past time is equal to tense, and this tense is called has fed. Has fed is the tense. So you better know your verb. Again I am saying your verb plus time is equal to tense. And this particular verb is called the base verb or a root verb. In your tense, you first go to your base verb, and every base verb in English beginning with to. So when the base verb comes from the to, that is called the to plus verb, or in the structure to infinitive plus time is equal to tense. It could be any time. It could be present time, past time or future time. That depends on whether the action is going or whether action is going to be done or whether the action is already over. So verb plus time is equal to tense. So tense is a word that comes from the Latin term tempus. Tempus means time. That means a verb when mixed with time creates your tense or produces your tense. This is all about your verb and tense. Remember that verb or tense just like the two sides of a coin. If tense comes from the verb, so verb becomes non-existence without tense, and a tense has no meaning if there is no verb. So verb plus time is equal to tense, and this particular tense is of two types. Number one is the present tense. Present tense deals with the present time action, and number two is the past tense. Some grammarians say that past tense means it is non-present. If something is not present, it could be your past tense. So past tense is otherwise known as non-present because it is not present. So what we generally mean by present? Present tense means present time action. Past tense means the action that was already over in the past time. So your tense is of two types. Then we have to say why can't be there future tense? Actually there can't be no future tense even though we have future time. Because even though we have the future time, there is no future tense. You can simply say future time reference. Certain verbs having tenses refer to future time events or future time references. We don't have a future tense. Why? Because we don't have a particular verbs having the future tense form. Every tense has a certain forms. Your present tense has a certain forms. Past tense has a certain forms, but we don't have a future time forms. That is why it is called future time references. So basically you just remember that your tense is of two types. Number one is the present tense. Number two is the past tense. And if you just want to discuss about your future tense, remember that you don't have your future tense. Rather, you have your future time references. So in the next class, I will throw light on your present tense and the various forms of the present tense and their uses. And again in the next class, we will dwell on your past tense, that is called the various forms of the past tense, and in the subsequent class, we will throw light particularly on your future time references. So always remember that your tense is very vital and the tense comes from the verb. And very funny thing, you will love to. If tense comes from the verb, remember your verb is called soul of English language or soul of EG. EG means English grammar. Your verb is called the soul of English grammar. And the tense that comes from the verb, it is called the brain of English grammar. It is called the brain of EG. EG means English grammar. Always remember, always get yourself focused. If tense comes from the verb, and if it is essential to know the verb first, in order to know about your tense, always remember, tense is called the soul of English grammar, EG, and tense is called the brain of English grammar. This is all about, I simply told you today about the verb plus time is equal to tense and the use of tense in various sentences, present tense and past time. Apart from the present and past time, we have also future time references, which I will deal exhaustively or elaborately when I will be taking my next class. For all notification, please subscribe my channel English Grammar icon and press the bell icon. That's all for today. Thanks you, my students.